Hello everyone, how's it going? Billy Ballgame here, back with another video. On this channel, I'm just a dude that likes to talk about baseball cards. And today's conversation about baseball cards is going to be about eye appeal. So, eye appeal is a subjective term, right? Like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and one collector's opinion of eye appeal may be different from another's. So I just wanted to have kind of a conversation about that today and ask you all what you thought. Like, what do you look for when you talk about eye appeal of a card? Like, what is it that you prefer when it comes to eye appeal? What are some things that turn you off with a card? And then what are some of the most important factors for you when it comes to purchasing a card? So that's kind of the general conversation I wanted to have today, and please leave your thoughts on what eye appeal means to you and what you look for with eye appeal. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. But before I dive into the conversation about eye appeal, I wanted to give a shout out to my buddy Steven with a PH, aka RipFan8. He's, again, we got to spend some time together at the National, and he's one of my favorite people on earth. Like, just what an amazing dude, just such excitement, passion, general enthusiasm or genuine enthusiasm for the hobby. And he sent me a care package that I got, I believe it was earlier this week, or it might have been like Saturday of last weekend. And today's Friday as I'm filming this video, by the way. But as you all know, I'm a huge King Griffey Jr. fan. You can see a Beckett here from 1993 that I've priced all my cards in this far case off of. You can see that row up there on my shelf is all King Griffey Jr.'s. I've got King Griffey Jr. starting lineups back here. I've got King Griffey Jr. cereal boxes up here. I've got a King Griffey Jr. autographed bat above my TV. Like, King Griffey Jr. has pretty consistently, other than a short period of time where he played on the Reds, maybe not a short period of time because it was about half his career, but King Griffey Jr. has really been my favorite player for the most part since I was 13 years old in '89, because I didn't turn 14 until the fall. So King Griffey Jr. is one of my favorite players, and my buddy Steven with a PH sent me an amazing care package of a set of cards that commemorate up to 1998 some of King Griffey Jr.'s biggest career home runs. And I had never seen these cards before, and it's an amazing set. And so I wanted to show you those today before I get into the conversation about centering. And so this is a bigger version here of his 99 tops that was in this box. And if you know, and I didn't think to ask Steven where this came from, but if you know what this comes from, let me know. Was it a box topper or something like that is what I'm guessing. But I love this card, and this will definitely be one that I send in to get graded at some point, because I have, these are all boxes of cards right here that I want to get graded here before too long. It's probably going to take me, shoot, a year or so to get these graded. So again, thank you, Steven. What an awesome care package. Just what an awesome dude you are. I love your passion for the hobby and just sharing your passion with your friends. And that's really what the hobby for me is all about, and that's really what this YouTube card community is all about. So thank you once again, Steven. And then, so some of the cards out of this set, and again, they're amazing. Like, gold foil, just beautiful looking cards, and I had never seen these before, and these are in amazing condition. There are the backs. And so each card commemorates, as you can tell from the title, up to this point in his career, his most memorable home runs. And this is when he hit his first major league home run in on April 10th of '89. So it goes through his biggest home runs for his first roughly 10 seasons. So this was one of my favorite times as a young baseball fan, was seeing King Griffey Jr. and his dad play together for the Mariners, and him cutting his dad off from center field. King Griffey Jr. obviously was in center field and cut in front of his dad to catch a fly ball. And so that one is when they went back to back. And then this one is from, let's see, his first All-Star game home run. So yeah, these are just really cool, and what amazing sharp cards they are. So thank you once again, Steven. I can't tell you how much Steven has impacted me within the card community and in the hobby since we met at the National. Like, we text regularly. He sent this care package to me. Like, my wife finally ordered his t-shirt, so that'll be hopefully out to you here pretty soon, Steven, and I'm going to put some other stuff together for you. But yeah, I think these are amazing. So thank you once again. So there are, I want to say, 10 cards in this box set, and they're great. And if you are newer to collecting and didn't really collect in the late 80s, early to mid 90s, even into the late 90s, like, Upper Deck was where it was at. Like, they were probably or at least one of the biggest brands in the business. And I miss them not having licensed baseball cards anymore. And then again, their popularity kind of fell off after Topps kind of reestablished itself as the leader in in baseball cards. And then here's a 3x5 for his 300th home run. So this one you could order an exclusive card based off of this for his 300th home run. So I just thought these were really cool and wanted to show them to you all. So thank you once again, Steven. Let me put these back in the box carefully here. All right, back with you. So today, let's talk about eye appeal. So again, if you've been watching the channel for any period of time, you know that, well, I get accused of being a grade snob a lot, but I'm pretty particular on eye appeal when it comes to cards, and I really look for centering. I'm not at the same level as my buddy Dylan with Double D vintage cards, but I like centering. And like, in a perfect world, everything in the card would be perfect, right? It would be perfectly centered. It'd have a perfect picture, registration, surface, corners, everything would be perfect. But that's not the world we live in, right? So for me, eye appeal is a sliding scale depending on the grade. And my biggest wonder and kind of question that I have for you all is, when we talk about eye appeal, do we mean undergraded cards? Do we mean cards that present better than they're actually the grade on the slab? And I think in some cases we do. And my biggest example of that is my Hank Aaron rookie card, which of course, just another excuse to show it. But like, is this a very high eye appeal card for a 2? In my opinion, I think it is. But I think generally this card has really good eye appeal because there are some things that jump out. Like, it's centered, which for this card is hard to find. especially top to bottom with these 54 cards. And it presents well. So without the few flaws, I talked about the rubs here. That obviously bumps it down. And then the crease here. So this has extremely high, in my opinion, eye appeal for a 2. But if you looked at this quickly, like I've seen 3s and 4s that don't look as nice as this card. So in this case, maybe undergraded fits the definition of eye appeal. But me, again, I what I look for first in a card, and this is regardless of the grade, is I look for centering. And I look for registration and surface. And then again, depending on, what grade the card is in and all that stuff, I'll start looking at corners. And then corners become less important to me depending on the card. Like if it's a card from the 50s, like I can't afford an 8 or a 9 that may have perfect corners or close to it. And I'm looking mostly at the at mid-grade cards whenever I can afford them. So obviously with corners, there's going to be some issues with corners in those grades. And so really for me, when it comes to eye appeal, centering is first and foremost. Registration and the coloring, so the photo of the card, like I kind of include those all together. Like it can be a card that's the registration is off, but the colors are still really bright and nice and it looks good, but it's gonna be a little bit dull because all the colors aren't lining up the way they're supposed to. So registration can definitely affect how the colors present themselves, and of course they just affect the overall look of the picture and the card. So for me, that's really important. And then probably third to that would be the corners, and you can throw surface in there too, because as the grade dictates that. Like if it's a 3 in a card from the 30s, then I might have a little bit more leeway for the corners and in certain cards even the centering. So for me, it's all subjective, and a lot of it depends on the card. And Ozzie Smith's rookie card being a great example, we know how notoriously off-centered this card is. And this one does not have great centering for a 7. But when I take into account how hard it is to find centered versions of this card, like I'm willing to overlook the centering not being close to dead on with this card, just because I know how hard it is to find with centering. And Dylan has broken that down on his channel also, and he actually grades them on how difficult they are to find centered. And so would I love to find a centered 7 of Ozzie Smith? Absolutely. Would I love to find a centered 8? Like that would be perfect for my collection. But for me, it's just a matter of the trade-off. Like, am I willing to pay the money I need for a certain card to get the perfect example that meets all the criteria? And with this one, I'm not sure that I am. And if I am, I'm not there yet. So to me, again, there are some variables. Like, this is a card that might drive some of you out there nuts because it's got this black overprinting, print mark, print line, roller mark, whatever you want to call it, on the surface. And with a lot of cards, that would bother me too. But it doesn't jump out at me when I look at it because the image is so good. It's so well centered and the corners are so good. So for me, when I look at this card, like I think that black smudge up there on the top is what's keeping this card from being an 8, and I wouldn't be able to afford an 8. So for me, in this case, I'm willing to overlook the fact that it has some print issues up here at the top. So in this card specifically, it doesn't bother me in the least, whereas other cards, excuse me, with other cards, it really might irk me. Like to a certain extent, like I'm almost OCD about cards sometimes. So again, this is an example where the sliding scale allows me to overlook something that I would consider, at top 3 that I look for when it comes to considering eye appeal. That would be, top 3 most important for me. And some of you, everybody's different. Everybody has different things they look for. Some of you may not care about the centering, or maybe you do care about the centering, but the corners are way more important to you. Where I've said, if it's a 5 or a 6, I know there's going to be corner damage on it. That's probably why it graded as a 5 or a 6. And it's all a sliding scale, right? Because if you find a card graded in a 5 that has really sharp corners, like there's going to be an issue with it somewhere else that helped lower that grade down to a 5. Like, perfect example, the Hank Aaron. The reason why this is a 2, despite perfect centering almost and really sharp corners, is because of that wrinkle and these 2 rub spots on the surface. Like, that is why technically this is graded as a 2. So, maybe a card with really sharp corners and really good centering that you look at it and you're like, why is that a 5? And then you shine it in the light and you hit the right area, there might be a divot in the surface or something like that bumped that grade, made that grade be bumped down. So again, there's a lot of variance, and the variance increases as you go lower in the scale on what's allowable for that grade. So I think a lot of times when we talk about eye appeal, it's easy for us to pick out a card that we think is undergraded. So that would be an example of a really high eye appeal card. And by eye appeal, do we mean centering, corners, surface, registration, and coloring? Like, is that what we mean? Like, for a 5, if I would say that this is a high eye appeal 5, would I be saying that for a 5 this has really good edges and corners and centering and registration and photo? So I think a lot of the times, and again, I'm just spitballing, I'm speaking off the cuff here, I think a lot of times that eye appeal and undergraded could be interchangeable. With John, Wade Boggs fan, his Mike Schmidt that he bought at the National, his rookie, gorgeous example of a 5. Very, very high eye appeal for a 5, right? We could probably say that is undergraded. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that and see if you think high eye appeal and undergraded are interchangeable. Because again, for me, in a lot of instances, I think a lot of the times you could use either term. You could use undergraded or high eye appeal. And normally that usually follows along with the grade, right? Like, and I will talk about that card has really high eye appeal. But there are also times where I will talk about that card has really high eye appeal for such and such a grade. So here's another example. Thanks to my buddy Chris from Missouri, this was a gift, and it just again shows you his generosity. He gave this to me ungraded, and I sent it in, and it got a 5.5. And this to me has great eye appeal. Now, it's a little bit off center from left to right. And normally, left to right centering, especially on a horizontal card, really bothers me. For some reason, top to bottom doesn't bother me as much, but left to right centering really bothers me. And I think this one does not bother me because its left to right centering is off a little bit, but it's not enough to pull my eye away from the image of the card in this example. And this is a great looking 5.5 to me. And the registration and the color on this thing just pops. So I think for me, consistently, what you will find in my collection, at least what I shoot for, is centered cards with great coloring and great registration is really what I look for. And so here's another card I got from Chris, and I showed these last night, some of them on the live stream I was on with my buddy Jason, Everyday Card Collector, and Sammy Thunder on Sammy's channel last night. And thank you once again, guys, for having me on. I really enjoy live streams, and I haven't done a lot of them, and those are a lot of fun. But here's an example of a card with amazing eye appeal to me for a 6, because this one checks a lot of the boxes. It has really nice centering, it has really nice coloring, and really nice registration. And I would say that I think this card is undergraded. So again, there's another example of how eye appeal and saying a card is undergraded really can be interchangeable. Like this one has a small print dot right there, but that is not enough, in my opinion, to knock this card down to a 6. But what other issues do you see with that card? So this to me is a beauty. And a really good part about an undergraded card is, like, you're probably going to pay up for the grade, but a lot of times it would still be cheaper than the next grade up, at least in the middle range of that grade. Like, there is overlap. There would be overlap between a really, really nice 6 and maybe a really bad 7. Like, there's going to be overlap there, but you're not going to be able to get this eye appeal in a 7 for the same price. So a lot of times for a comparable card, it's going to save you money to buy high eye appeal or undergraded cards. And then here's an example of one that maybe doesn't quite have as much eye appeal. And this is another card that I bought off of Chris. This was all in those 3, Brooks Robinson, Harmon Killebrew, and my Bob Gibson. I bought them all off of him at the same time. Now, this one again, tremendous registration, tremendous coloring. It's really good corners and edges. Like, this one might be undergraded as well. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. But this one doesn't have quite the same level of eye appeal because of the centering. But again, for me, top to bottom centering on these horizontal cards does not bother me nearly as much as left to right centering does. So again, this card, it doesn't detract for me personally. And some of you, this card might drive you nuts and you would never own that card. And that's again another example of how eye appeal is subjective. This card's centering doesn't bother me in the least because, again, this image in this picture is so sharp that the centering doesn't draw my eye toward the fact that it's off-centered. So it doesn't bother me in the least. And I think that's really one thing that can make it very subjective, for one thing, but it can also make it different from card to card, because maybe, you know, there's one flaw in a card that you normally, it wouldn't bother you, but for that particular card, it pulls your eye away from the image or whatever it is, right? And it may normally be something that wouldn't bother you at all. So for me, a big part of it is, again, it just depends on the card, because normally this is something that would bother me. But I think the fact that it's up in the corner and it doesn't pull my eye away from the image, it doesn't bother me in the least. And when I do see it, I think to myself, well, this card might have been an 8 if that blemish wasn't there, right? So it doesn't bother me. And then so I've got a couple more here that I think are examples of high eye appeal cards. So I've shown this before on my channel. This is another one that I showed last night. The Eddie Murray card is another one that is really tough to find centered, and they're out there, don't get me wrong, but you're not just going to find them every day. And this one is an example for me of a nicely centered high eye appeal version of this card, and it's off centered. It's off centered from top to bottom. But again, top to bottom centering doesn't bother me nearly as much. And this is something my buddy Greg from Midlife Cards talked about here recently. And I think Adam was in one of his comments that left and right centering really bugs us, but for some reason top to bottom centering doesn't. And this is another example, and it's not horribly centered, but it's enough to where you can notice it if you're looking for it. And the back has some off centering, but again, I don't just hang out and check out the backs of cards very often, so the back doesn't bother me at all. And so for me, this is an example of great eye appeal. Maybe not for the grade, but for this specific card, this is a great example of an Eddie Murray rookie card in my mind. And it may not be, the best example of your average 7 for a baseball card, but in my opinion, I think this one is pretty nice for a 7, and really that's why I bought it. So when we see eye appeal and undergraded cards, for me, those are the ones that I usually end up buying because they just jump out at me. And so if that's the case for you, let me know. And I think for some of you it is. And I know at least for one guy, and he lives pretty close to me, and his name is Tom. I know for one guy named Tom, that's definitely the case. And probably for another guy named Adam, that his last name is Sanctuary. I think that's kind of how it works for him too. And here's another example of a card that's notoriously off-centered. Now, this is a great example of a 7, period, in my mind. But for a George Brett rookie card, this is a tremendous example of a 7, because this card is clean. This card is centered. And again, this is another card that's not easy to find centered. And I think there's a little bit of a blemish in the green in one of these corners, if I remember right. Probably caused it to be knocked down. Maybe it's the purple right there. I can't remember, but when I have to look that hard to find a flaw, this is a sharp example of a card. So if you're a collector that centering doesn't bother you, it may be a way to save you money, because these are cards that you would end up usually having to pay up for at shows usually. So again, just let me know what your opinion is and what you look for when it comes to the term eye appeal. And let me know if you think that is an interchangeable term, also meaning undergraded. And I'm not saying that's always the case. I'm not saying, again, I'm right or wrong. I'm just one dude with an opinion that likes to get on YouTube and run his mouth. So again, nothing I say on this channel, period, is set in stone. But I just wanted to know you all's opinion and what all of you looked for when it comes to eye appeal. And I think that's pretty much going to cover it for this week, man. I'm right at 30 minutes, so I'm really rolling it with these shorter videos. But thanks again to Sammy and Jason for having Chris and I on last night. I've been on YouTube for a little over a year and a half. Chris and I, neither one of us are the most tech savvy dudes on earth, and we've been talking about doing a collaboration of some sort together for quite a while. And so all of this came together from Jason coming by, and I'm happy that I was able to go on with Chris last night and with just two more amazing dudes in Jason and Sammy. So thank you guys once again. I really appreciate it. Let me see. I'm trying to think if, while I have your undivided attention 30 minutes into this video, when half of you have already tuned out probably, if there's anything else that I want to talk about. And I really don't think for today, unless I miss something after I turn my camera off, because that happens sometimes. Unless I miss something, I really do think that I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up at that. So until the next one, I hope everybody has a good one, and I'll talk to you later.